Hey, it's TDA, and today I have another guide for you on Alchemy Factory. This time around we're focusing on the early mid-game, which I think honestly is the hardest part of the game. Specifically, we are going to complete phase 4, and that means we're going to automate our plants, which are currently not automated yet at the beginning of this phase. And I'm going to show you a couple of ways to be more efficient about this game and really set you up for success in the later parts of this game. And just to prove my point, this is everything we're going to be building today. Now, the main reason that I say that this is probably the hardest part of the game is that you haven't really automated your plants yet, and the stuff that your plants are producing is the stuff that is actually worth anything. I mean, all of these early game items are nice and easy to produce, but they don't really sell for a lot, and you need a lot more money than they will bring in order to actually do anything moving forward. So, here's a couple of tricks to speed that up. In phase 4, the main bottleneck that you will run into is your money. If you don't have money to expand your factory, then things are just going to come to a standstill. So in order to combat that, there's two different things you can do. You can focus on your shop as option 1, and if you do that, then I would recommend you reset your points. It will cost you a little bit of money, but that's not a big problem. And then just put all your points in sales ability. This is going to increase your shop profit, but also the amount of stuff that your customers buy, and that makes sure that even those low-level items that are sitting in your shop are going to be worth selling. Now, every level that you pick up is going to be more valuable, because you can see it just went up from 3% profit to 4%. And then if you go all the way down, the next levels will actually give you 5% additional shop profit increase. So this is 10%, 18%, what is it? 24% additional profit from everything that you're selling in your shop. So that is a massive increase to your margin. This is not going to give you any production bonuses, but honestly, as long as you're selling everything that you're producing, you're going to be making money hand over fist. However, if you really want to make some money during phase 4, I recommend that you go through your mailbox, and specifically that means focusing on the customer management part of the technology tree. This is going to increase your quest rewards, and if you pick up level 1, 2, 3, and 4, not only are you going to increase the total quest reward value by 28%, which is huge, you're also going to get an additional random quest every single day. So that means twice the amount of quests and a lot of money to be made there. Now, if you really want to make a lot of money, you can spend the remaining 2 points on customer management level 5 and 6, which is going to give you another total of 20% additional value to your quest rewards, which means that in total, you're going to be making about 50% more on every single quest, and you have twice the amount of quests. So if you check your mailbox, all of these quests are going to be massively valuable to you, and that's just a very easy way to make a lot of money in the early game. And as always, I just want to point out, there's no such thing as playing this game wrong. So if you think just focusing on money is kind of lame and you want to focus on more things that improve your factory, by all means do so. Just keep in mind that if you have a lot of money, you can always build more factory and improve your factory that way. Now, because I'm going to go down the quest route, I'm going to re-optimize the layout of my shop a little bit. Don't worry, we're going to be doing this a couple of more times throughout the game, so don't worry too much about breaking things. But yeah, I want things to be a little bit more efficient. First up, since I'm not going to be utilizing my shop for the foreseeable future, I just moved everything that I'm producing up here, and I removed all the catapults and stuff. I also made the belt stick out of the boxes a little bit, so I can easily see what I'm producing where and which I have the most of. And of course, I removed things like my bed and the counter and stuff like that I'm not really using at the moment anyway. I'm also going to go and buy the plot to the left of where you start out with. This is the cheapest one, and that will give us a lot of open space to build with that we can also easily access. Now, you might wonder why I just opened up this additional space. I'll show you in a second, but in order to do that, we're going to have to get ourselves some new builds. We're still going to make sure that there's money flowing into our factory, so we're producing stuff, and that's where this box comes in. This is a very low-tech way of keeping our stuff supplied. Now, this is going to mostly need copper coins if you want to spread things around efficiently. If you are running out of those, you can always pick up the bank portal over here. This is going to take you a little bit of money to set up, but basically this allows you to transform coins into other coins. If you place that between your storage box and your actual belt with coins, then you can set the bank portal to, for example, make copper coins, make them stacks of 50. You probably want as many as you can if you're talking about copper. And then even if you dump some copper in here, it will still transform that copper into other copper, so that's not really a problem. And if you want to say, for example, put in some silver coins, you can still do that, and it will transform these silver coins into a whole bunch of copper coins, thereby making sure that you can spread things through your factory as efficiently as possible. Now, because we just reduced our production rates quite a bit, and I know I'm going to need a fair amount of both iron ingots as well as what are these called? Planks. I'm gonna double up on some of that production. Now the planks themselves, of course, is super easy. You just set that up like so, and then have another thingy for that. And there we go. And then all we need is a box and a little bit of belt, and there we go. Now we have another 30 per minute. That's gonna be more than enough to satisfy our needs. But in order to make sure we also have enough iron coming in, I'm gonna set up a special build. Iron ingots are actually pretty slow to produce, so I'm going to double up on the production of them over here, and I'm going to do that in a way that is aesthetically pleasing. So I'm going to start out with 2 stone furnaces with the openings facing each other, and I'm going to go and add in some of the supply. Nothing too complicated here. We're just going to add a smelter on top of the furnace, and then we're going to have a table saw for each. Now, just to show you how the math works in this game, an iron smelter is going to consume 9 heat per second. Now, we also have the furnace consuming 1 heat per second as well, so that's a total of 10 per second. If you then take a look at the fuel we're currently using, which is planks, this is going to take, 1 plank is worth 20 heat or power. And that means that we're going to need 1 plank every 2 seconds or 30 per minute, which happens to be the exact amount that a table saw produces. So this is exactly enough to keep this furnace up and running the entire time. It's a good practice at this point to try to make your builds as compact as you can keep them. So this is what I'm doing over here. Every smelter needs to be able to output its iron somewhere. And you can see these lifts going down here on top of this platform that I built with just a couple of wooden blocks that combine these 2 smelter outputs into a single line that goes down and lift on the other side, and then down here onto these belts. Now every smelter can handle the output in 2 processors, so this is 5 per minute, and each of these smelters is going to produce 10 per minute. And again, if you upgrade it, the ratio will keep this being the same. And then the iron nails are going to go into this box, and the iron ingots that we also need in order to build stuff are going to go into this box in the middle. I am then going to use one of my favorite items in the game to build stuff, and that's the lab stand over here in order to make things a little bit more visible. So the lab stands come in 2 sizes, 2 up and 1 up. And if you place one in front of one of these boxes like so, and you can put a little belt on top of that, then you can also see what's actually in these boxes a little bit more easily. Those same lab stands are going to allow us to easily access the iron smelter from the ground as well. All we need to do is pick the larger version, place a couple of them like so, and suddenly we have a platform that can access the iron smelter. All we need to do now is pick a lift, have that go all the way up like so, and then if we run to the other side, stand on our processors, we can connect that up to this. And then all we need to do is place down another piece of belt, another one of these purchasing portals, and voila, now we can easily access the top of the iron smelter. And if we start buying the iron ore over here, it's going to be transported all the way up. Now the downside of this construction is that there is going to be quite a few of these iron ingots being stuck in here, because this will just keep buying as long as it can. But you know, it's not the worst problem in the world. We'll have plenty of money to go around. And before you know it, we are producing both nails as well as ingots, and we have as much as we need in order to complete our quest. Now, speaking of quests, remember, you should never unlock an item with a value, so anything you can sell, before you're ready to produce it, mostly because otherwise you will get quests that you can't complete, and of course you want to complete as many quests as you can in order to get money. The next thing we're going to be working towards is the workbench. Now, we already unlocked the workbench in level 3 or phase 3, but in order to actually progress here, we're going to need some of the items that we're currently producing. So first of all, you want to unlock the building tool level 1. That is going to require just some basic stuff that we're now already producing. But the next level after that is going to require bricks and clay. And we really want level 2 because this is going to allow us to redesign our actual factory or shop, depending on what you want to call it. In order to produce bricks, we need clay, and in order to produce clay, we need to unlock the crucible. Go ahead and unlock the clay level. That is not going to mess up our quest because you can't actually sell clay. And in order to make clay, as you can see, we will need 2 new different items that we just unlocked. The first item is sand that we could actually already make for a little while, and all we need to do there is just grind some stone into sand. So that's super straightforward. However, the charcoal powder that we need is actually something we need to create out of charcoal first, and charcoal is made by putting planks into a crucible, kind of heating them up, and making charcoal out of them. Now, these crucibles are going to be built on top of a furnace, similar like the larger smelter that we just built. And these are going to consume 4 power each. Now, we can build a whole bunch of these crucibles on top of a single furnace, so we're going to have to do some math. Every crucible is going to require 4 power per second. And since we can fit 3 of them on a single furnace, that means we need 12 power per second. And yes, I'm going to forget about the stone furnace that also requires 1 power per second, just to keep the math easy. Because it turns out that if you look at the recipe for charcoal powder, 1 plank turns into 1 charcoal, turns into 1 powder. So this is just all 1 to 1. And we can make 1 of these powders every 4 seconds. That means that 1 of these crucibles making powder is going to be exactly enough to fuel the furnace that it's going to be standing on, which means that we can fuel another 2 furnaces by the production that we get out of these 2. Which means that if we have a stone furnace completely dedicated to fueling the stone furnaces making charcoal powder, then we can have the other 2 furnaces completely dedicated to producing charcoal powder to be used elsewhere. Now, sure, you can build all of this just side by side, but honestly, you're going to be running out of building space pretty quick, and that means you need to expand your factory. Not the worst thing in the world, but if you want to be a little bit more space efficient, then I recommend you start thinking vertically in builds like this as well. You will probably find a lot of guides that tell you to build vertically and be as compact as you can. And honestly, if you find that a fun challenge, then by all means, go and do that. This is my attempt at doing exactly that. And yes, this does save you some space if you compare it to, just having 3 furnaces next to each other like this. I definitely save myself some space over here, probably about a furnace width of space. But I'll be honest, I really dislike this style of building just because it doesn't look very good. That's a very personal opinion, so you do you, but I'll show you an alternative as well. There you go. This build does the exact same thing, and it looks way more clean if you ask me. It still has the 5 table saws that I need to supply all my crucibles with planks. It still has the 9 crucibles on top of here with 3 furnaces, but it's so much easier to build like this, and it's also just faster. It also looks a lot more clean if you build a couple of these things next to each other. So all in all, this is definitely my preference, even if it's not as space efficient as the other build that I just showed you. The same thing is going on over here. So we have 2 table saws combining into a single line, going into the 4 crucibles that can supply. And then we have the same thing going on over here with the last remaining table saw feeding into the last crucible. And then every crucible has its own grinder that is going to be combined over here. We have a lift going down so we can make sure that there's enough charcoal going into all of these furnaces. And then the other 2 belts are basically just outgoing belts over here that I can use to do whatever I want. Now, of course, just the charcoal powder by itself, it's not going to do us any favors, so we're going to need to actually start producing some clay. Luckily, that is now very simple. Now we have this up and running. Clay is one of those recipes where it really starts to pay off to pay attention to the ratios, because as you can see, if you want to make 15 clay per minute, which by the way is more than enough to begin with, you're already going to need a full belt of sand going in, so it doesn't really make sense to scale this up any further. In order to make neat and organized builds, I find that it helps to kind of visualize things by laying them out. So in order to fill that one assembler with a full belt of sand, we're going to need a total of 12 grinders, because these things are super slow. And we're also going to need a full belt of stone, which means that we are going to need 3 of these stone crushers, because each only produces 20 per minute. Now, not the most complicated build, because we already have half a belt of charcoal waiting for us right over here. There's about 1.5 belt actually, so way more than we need. So this is going to be a very straightforward build. We can condense all of that by stacking those grinders on top of each other. So we have a row of 4 grinders and we have 3 of them on top of each other. And then all I'm doing here is bringing in some stone. I will set this to stone. There we go. And then that is going to be coming out of these stone crushers over here. It's exactly a belt full, so that's a really nice and convenient to keep things tidy. And then the belt is going to go under here into the grinders, then up here into another row of grinders, and then up here into another row of grinders. And similarly, it's going to come out over here, go down, helps if there's actually a belt there, be combined with the grinders on the second level and then the ground floor as well, and then go into the assembler where we are going to be making clay. Now all we need to do is hook this up to our charcoal provider and we are good to go. And then all I need to do is put in some seed money in my box over here so I can start funding everything that needs to go onto these sawmills and stone crushers. And of course hook up the 2 builds together to make sure that the powder that we are producing over here is being brought into the assembler. Now, by the way, I like using these lifts in order to make a little neat looking bridge. Of course, you can also use, this type of bridge if you want to. I just think that looks a lot less clean than the alternative that I'm using over here. Now, there is one more trick that you need to be aware of, because the powder build will not start running out of itself. You can see there's planks coming in, but nothing is being produced. And that's because we need to kind of kickstart that first furnace over here. So we need to dump in some wood, for example. Then it will start producing and it will start putting out some of that powder over here. That powder is going to go back into the furnace and then it's going to run by itself just fine. You just need to kind of kickstart it in order for it to begin. As a side note, just to show you the power of doing this all with the use of quests rather than using the shop for the individual shoppers. I've gotten very unlucky with my quests in this particular run. I got all kinds of low value quests, even though it's being improved by 50%. It's still not a lot of money that I'm getting from them, and all of them for some reason require iron ingots. I just turn in one. Yeah, so that is about as bad as it can get, and still I'm doing just fine on money. Next up on the list is bricks. Now, I'm actually not going to research bricks until I have my build ready for it, because remember, as soon as we unlock it, we will get quests that ask for it. But I am going to unlock the kiln which we need in order to make those bricks. Luckily, we don't need to unlock the production chain in order to prepare for it, because we can already check out the recipe. We are going to be making bricks out of clay in a 1-to-1 ratio, and we're going to be making 10 bricks per minute in a single kiln, which is actually a little bit less than we're producing if we make a single kiln. So this is super easy to do. The kiln is a very easy to use type of machine, which just has a single input and a single output, and you put it on top of a furnace. We can use some of the overflow from the charcoal powder line that we are using to make the clay to actually fuel the stone furnace, and then all we need to do is feed in the clay, which can look something like this, with the output port over here flowing back to the front. I always like to keep my inputs on the back and my outputs on the front, with the exception of anything that is related to fuel or fertilizer in the moment, as well as money. So money, fertilizer, and fuel is the things that go in the back, and then everything else just outputs in the front. That just keeps things neat and organized and easy to track down. Now, as you can see, I'm producing plenty of clay, but I'm not actually producing any bricks yet because I haven't actually unlocked the recipe, but we're now ready to do that. So in 21.5 seconds, we are producing bricks. As a side note, it finally seems that my luck has turned, because as you can see, I just got a bulk order, which is coming in at the 160% market price. And that's not even counting the 50% on top of that I get from my talents. And that's going to give me 50 silver, which is more than enough to do everything we need to do in the rest of this episode. As a side note, while you're doing all of this building, I do recommend that you keep your farms up and running and make sure that you keep producing all of that stuff that you need from flax as well as the sage, because yeah, you are going to need to actually sell stuff, and if you're not producing it, it's going to take a while for you to actually get that money in. But don't worry, the next thing on the list is going to solve all our issues in terms of those plants, because we're going to unlock fertilizer and the nursery. Now we have the clay to actually make that. But before we get into that, let's go back to the workbench and unlock the building tool level 2. Now, the reason that I've been working towards this is very simple. This is going to allow us to edit our mansion, as you can see over here. Now, what I prefer doing, and you might do something else that's completely fine, is actually remove the entire building. You can remove everything except for the entrance, but if you do remove stuff, The nice thing is you will get some building materials out of that, including some brick. So you actually get the brick back that you spent to unlock this. And it's going to be a lot easier to look around and see what you're doing. You have a nice open space to work with. And on top of that, you can now start building floors. So you can build those nice little floor tiles. And I would recommend that you build everything from now on top of these floor tiles, including the builds that you just put down next to that, if you did the same thing I did. Mostly because once you actually decide to turn back your shop into an actual shop, you will need to build everything in terms of the demand and supply stuff for your customers on top of these floors. This counts as your shop. Anything that is not on a floor does not count as your shop. So you can actually, for example, build, I don't know, a shelf over here, and this will now be something that your customers can find. If you build it over here, your customers will not be able to find it. It's easier to tell probably if you do it with one of these potions. You can see the exclamation mark. I can't find this, but if I build it over here, there's no such thing. So build everything on floors is basically the short answer to this question. Now don't panic, because if you go into the blueprint mode, you can very easily select everything that you just built, like so. Make sure you do actually select everything, including all the belts on the sides, and then press T. This is going to cut it and remove everything that you have. Now you're probably going to run into the same situation that I am now in, which basically means that not everything fits into my inventory. That's not a problem. You can always just build a couple of boxes to put down some of the stuff that just fell to the ground. Probably what you'll find is that it's a lot of stuff like the charcoal that you are making, but also things like logs and things like that. So just pick those up, clear those out, and then build the thing back where it came from. Okay, nice and tidy. I really like the looks of our clay factory over here, or brick factory I should say, and look at how clean these builds look. You don't need to make everything stack on together. You don't need to be hyper efficient. I say just make things look neat. However, first things first, we'll actually need some basic fertilizer, and that's pretty straightforward to make. You can make 15 per second in an assembler, and in order to do that, you're also going to need 15 per second of quicklime powder and 15 per second of plant ash. Now, quicklime powder is made from quicklime, and quicklime is made from stone. So this is all pretty straightforward, but the stone is going to be turned into quicklime through a crucible. So it's a good thing we have some additional coal already up and running. I shouldn't say coal because that's something else. Charcoal powder is what we have in terms of fuel. And the plant ash itself is actually also made in a crucible. We're going to burn up some sage and turn that into ash. Just to keep things simple, I'm going to aim for a full belt of basic fertilizer. So once again, I'm just going to lay out what we need in order to make that. Okay, here we have everything visualized. So in order to make a full belt of basic fertilizer, we're going to need a full belt of quicklime powder and plant ash. The quicklime powder is going to be made, the quicklime I should say, is going to be made in the crucibles. We need 7 of those. That's a really annoying amount because we are going to need 3 furnaces with one of them almost being empty. We're also going to need 7 grinders right in top of those crucibles to make it into the powder. We're also going to need the plant ash, which we only need 3 crucibles to make, along with 3 nurseries that are actually going to make the sage that we're going to burn. So some of the fertilizer is going to go into these nurseries again, kind of the same thing that we had happening with the coal setup. Then in order to supply the crucibles with enough stone to actually turn into quicklime, we need a total of 3 stone crushers, because that's going to fill up an entire belt, and that's exactly enough to get a belt full of quicklime powder. Oh well, it means that all we need to do now is put this in a nice looking layout. Okay, something like this is a pretty good start. I put all of the assemblers in the corner over here. I put the furnaces next to each other. I left the open space in between the crucibles that are going to make the ash and the lime. And then I have the 3 nurseries that are going to make the sage here on the side. And that means that I can feed the fertilizer that comes out into those nurseries first, because remember, those need to have priority, because those are the ones that are actually going to make everything else. And then I have the output for the fertilizer over here in the back. Now I can collect the sage over here. This is going to be 1 belt. And then all I need to do is bring this up here into these crucibles to make the ash. And I also need to make sure I put those stone crushers somewhere that allows me to make the stone. And of course, if you lay everything out like I've done over here, these builds become really simple. All I need to do is bring up that belt with sage up here and then put it into those crucibles. Same thing over here. I have those 3 stone crushers up here that are going to be putting out the stone up here. That goes up here and then straight into the crucibles. And all I'm doing here is making sure that there's platforms for that little belt to be laying on top of. There's a belt coming in here that is going to sneak in between with coal. So that's going to have to be hooked up to some sort of fuel, coal powder, whatever. And I have the outgoing belt over here that is going to collect the remaining fertilizer. Looks pretty straightforward. Now, some people do prefer to have the purchasing portal for the stone right up to the stone crusher. I prefer to do it like this because this makes better use of the space, because if I put the purchasing portals up here, the buildings are going to become that much larger, and now it's almost square and it looks very tidy and organized. And of course I did do the math for you, because if you make a full belt of basic fertilizer without any upgrades, you are going to be able to feed that into 12 nurseries making sage, or 16 nurseries making flax. Now, of course, you are going to need to make at least 3 of these nurseries making the sage, because otherwise you won't get your fertilizer. So that means that you have at most 9 sage nurseries or 12 flax nurseries on top of that you can use elsewhere. Now that is going to translate into 3 full belts of sage, or 6 full belts of flax. So that's a whole lot of plant stuff, fully automated once you get this going. Now we have basic fertilizer, we can start to really automate all of those trading goods that we are currently making by hand. And other than the rope, the potions, the linen and the bandages, we also want to start making some wooden pulleys, because we need that for other machines later on down the road. And in order to make wooden pulleys, we also need some rope. Now the nice thing is, if you want a single machine making each of these materials at a 100% speed, you need exactly 2 of those layouts without any upgrades that I just made. None of these builds are very complicated, but you know, it's kind of nice to get them out of the way. So in order to make pulleys, we are going to need some rope and we need some planks. In order to make 15 per minute, we need 30 per minute of planks, which is a single table saw. And we're going to need a total of 15 rope per minute as well, which means we need 2 of these processors making a linen rope, which means we're going to be producing 20, but half of that is going to go into a box, or at least half of one of those processors. So we have a little bit of storage for rope, because we need that for various buildings as well. In order to make the rope, we are also going to need to produce some linen thread. Just 20 per minute is going to be enough, but that already takes a full belt of flax fiber. And since we have 2 of them, that means we have 2 belts of flax fiber coming in over here. Now, next to that, we have the most easy to make thing in the world. Healing potions just needs a single belt of sage fiber and a single belt of flax fiber. This is only going to produce 10 per minute, but if you want to scale it up, that's now super easy to do. Now, next up on the list is something a little bit more complicated. We have linen, which is only going to be producing at 12 per minute, but this is very expensive if you're going to sell that, so you don't need too much of this, generally speaking. But in order to make that at 12 per minute, we're going to need 120, so 2 full belts of linen thread coming in. That means we need 6 of these processors making that linen thread, and that means we need 6 full belts of flax fiber coming in as well. You can see I just stacked them up and let them down one by one as I came to those buildings, and I have another 3 on the opposite side. Then last but not least, in order to make bandages, we're going to need a very similar setup. Now I cheated a little bit, because technically you need 12 healing potions per minute, and I'm only going to be producing 10 per minute, so this is not going to be completely utilized, but just to keep the ratios nice and clean, we have this belt coming in over here that is going to be producing half of a full production of linen, so just 6 per minute. But if you take a look at the assembler over here, we only need 6 per minute for this to work. And then of course we have another full assembler making potions. So that is going to require another 3 belts of flax over here, and a belt of flax and a belt of sage fiber over here. And then we have all the plant stuff that we can currently make fully utilized, assuming of course we set this up. This is also a perfect opportunity to start getting a little bit more organized in my shop in case, well, for example, you want to actually open the shop once again. So what I've done over here is basically move my iron production in the corner. I snuck in my wood production over here, as you can see, and my mortar production. And then I have two of these layouts of fertilizer that are going to fuel everything else. In order to utilize all that fertilizer, we're going to need a whole bunch of nurseries, and I kind of like this layout over here. So just 2 by 2, and every single row of these is going to be able to fill an entire belt. Now we just need an efficient way to actually get stuff on the belt to where it needs to go. A simple tiered system like I'm making over here, which is layer upon layer of belts, kind of creates a bus of flags in this case, and you could stack this up pretty high actually, but you do want to be able to actually get around your factory, so I recommend keeping it to about this level. I'm gonna add 3 more belts on top of this, so this is 6 belts on top of each other. And this is what this looks like when it's actually set up. Now, of course, we still need to connect this to the machines, but I recommend you let it run for a little bit and have it collect a bit of fertilizer before you turn it on, because that will make sure the entire operation is going to be functioning from the get-go, rather than you having to wait for every single of these fertilizers to have to completely fill up. So connect the fertilizer sooner rather than later. And of course, remember that once you start to lay out the belts, you can do that in a couple of different ways. So first of all, you can of course just make a blueprint out of that, and then just use that to kind of like copy paste this and do it like this. Now, if you want to be a little bit more efficient, maybe in some regards, you could just first lay out the belt where you want it to go, something like this, and then just copy paste the top half of this. Just in case you change your mind for whatever reason. This comes down to doing pretty much the same thing, but it's a lot easier to lay out the belt and organize that than have to organize this entire thing at first. Well, I don't know about you, but I think this looks pretty awesome. It's also still very easy to get around my base just with jumping over the bus, and look at that. It's extremely organized in terms of bringing the stuff to the machines. Now, of course, I'm nowhere near done yet because I still need to connect up another 6 belts of flax over here, and then I need to use a similar layout for the sage. For the sage, I'm also going to use a total of 12 of these nurseries, mostly because that makes everything look very neat and clean, and I can just use mostly the same setup as I've done over here. But the difference is that we're going to have 3 nurseries feeding into a single belt. So you can see I hooked this up a little bit different in this kind of triangular shape, and I can just copy this shape over here, and then we're good to go in terms of that. This is going to be a total of 4 belts, so not 6 like the one for the flags, but you know, it's still a very nice and neat looking layout. I did make a little bit of a math mistake here, by the way, because I forgot to take into account that we also need some fuel for these nurseries. So actually this layout is going to run a little suboptimal once we get it going, but we will still produce a little bit of everything, and that's more than enough for the moment. Don't worry about it too much, because once we get about 2 levels of fuel efficiency and 2 levels of fertilizer efficiency, everything here is going to be running at pretty much 100% optimization anyway, so it's not the end of the world. And there we go. I think this looks pretty awesome, pretty organized. Now we have all of our early game production, including some of the mid game from phase 4 already, all kind of nicely centered in this aisle over here. So you can pick up everything that you need for your quests. I still have a little bit of leftovers just sitting here. I'm trying to use this first, and if I run out of this stuff, I'll just remove it. I have all the money in the world. You can see I have 185 silver in my inventory. And that's not counting the stuff that is still sitting in boxes over here, for example. So yeah, I have about 250 silver or so just sitting in boxes in total. And then there's plenty of stuff on the belts. If you ever run into money issues in terms of that you don't have space to put it anymore, you can always switch this to produce silver instead and just make a single coin of silver. And that means you can put 20 times as much value on your belts. So, you know, you can basically turn your belts into your own little bank. Now, if the underperformance of the flax is really bothering you, as you can see, it is producing, but it's not really going at the rate I would want it to, then I recommend that you go into the upgrade tree, take out levels 5 and 6 of customer management for now. We have plenty of money anyway, and put those into fuel efficiency and fertilizer efficiency. Both of those, just a single level, will take care of a lot of that underperformance that you're currently facing. But TDA, what about my money? Well, if it's money that you're worried about, it is time to start working on the sample request quest that you probably already completed at this point. But if you turn in 50 bandages, you will unlock the dispatch portal as well as the purchase contract for bandages. Now, what this allows you to do, this portal allows you to sell bandages with a contract. It's only going to sell bandages, so you can't just go and sell everything because you need a specific contract for that. Now, unlike the quest, you actually get less value for the bandages than if you would sell them in your shop or if you would sell them just through the quests. However, you can sell 800 bandages per day guaranteed, and that's without any upgrades to the technology tree, every single day. So as long as you're producing bandages, you can just instantly sell them and get your money back. And you're still making a profit at the wholesale price of 12 silver. So it's actually a pretty good deal and a very easy way to get a non-stop infinite amount of money basically flowing into your coffers. All you need is time. So it's time to expand the factory just a little bit more, and let's start working on that bandage production farm basically with all the blueprints that we just made. Nothing too complicated here, all we need to do is just rinse and repeat something that we've already done. So one fuel setup, like we've built before, is enough to fuel 2 of these fertilizer setups that we've also built before. Don't forget that you need to kickstart the first furnace that is making the fuel, as well as the furnace that is making the plant ash, and you can do that by just using a tiny little box over here, throwing in some sage that you're producing elsewhere, and that will make sure that you get that first plant ash going. You will produce some fertilizer, and it goes right back into your nurseries to produce more sage. And then that fuel should be exactly enough to fuel this kind of alternate little nursery setup I have over here. We need 4 belts of flax per setup, or per machine I should say, that's producing bandages, and we need 1 belt of sage. Now I have 4 of these, so that's a little bit too much, but I like keeping my layouts neat, as you've noticed by now, so there's no harm in having a 4th nursery in here. There's nothing going to go to waste. And yeah, you can do that twice, so this is a very clean looking setup. And then finally, all we need to do is hook that up to an assembler and making bandages, and of course the machines that you need in order to feed into that. But this is the exact same build that I've used before in this episode as well. Then we hook that up to a belt, and that is going to go into this dispatch portal, and we're going to set that to sell bandages. Now for every 50 bandages that I produce, I get 12 silver. This is going to be producing, because we have 2 of these machines, it's about 10 bandages per minute. So every 5 minutes I'm gonna get 12 silver for free, which is gonna go into this box. And you can also of course hook this up to your belts or whatever you want, but this is going to be producing infinite money. And if you want, you can actually build this 4 more times. So this entire layout that I have over here, you can build that in total 5 times, and that will then produce that 800 bandages per day that you can sell at the most. Is that needed? Probably not. Is it kind of fun to do? Sure. Keep in mind, however, that if you're going to scale this up all the way to producing 800 bandages per day, you're going to take up quite a bit of space on your floor. So do whatever you want, just keep that in mind. And keep in mind that if you do this, this is already going to give you 40 silver per day. You can scale that all the way up to almost 2 gold per day if you build the entire 800 bandages per day production chain. But yeah, it's completely up to you whether or not you do that. I mean, if your playthrough is anything like mine, you're probably already drowning in silver anyway. As you can see, I have 110 in my inventory, and then another about 100 sitting in here and in my bank. So yeah, you do you. However, I'm going to move on because we want to complete the rest of this production chain. And don't worry, this is not going to take too long. First up is glass, which is super easy to make. All we need is some sand and a kiln. Before we get into that, I just bought out the rest of the central plot in the village, so I have a lot more room to work with. And I'm also going to get myself some upgrades, because if you go to the workbench, you can now also unlock, for example, some inventory space. You should have a very easy time, of course, producing the linen thread, so just go ahead and craft that, and so you have some more inventory space to work with. The next level is just going to cost you a little bit of linen, so you probably have plenty of that by now as well. And yeah, that's just going to free up so much space in your inventory and make your life a little easier. Now, personally, I don't really care about the potion belt, and I don't really care about the gloves, but you can also pick those up if you want. One kiln making glass is going to require a full belt of sand. Luckily, that is now super easy. Remember this build that we made in order to make clay at the beginning of this episode? Well, all you need to do is take out this assembler, replace it with a kiln, and you're good to go. And there you go, this is going to be producing 10 glass per second using the belt of sand that's coming in. You, of course, need to make sure that there's some fuel going in as well. And then we have the glass coming out on the other side. Now, you don't need that much glass production initially, but you can easily scale this up. Just copy and paste this build a few more times if you want. I decided to go with a double setup like this, so this is going to be producing 20 glass per minute, and of course we need some fuel to go in, so I built another one of those fuel setups. We have leftover fuel for sure, but you know, we can probably use that elsewhere soon. I also decided to keep the middle part of my shop open, so I can always just open up my shop, set up some shelves, stuff like that. I'm not doing that for the moment, mostly because I just need most of my production to complete all of my quests. And if I'm going to be selling random stuff to my customers, that's just going to slow me down. But if you want to open your shop again, you can do so whenever you want. Now, that is the glass fixed. Let's move on. We're almost there. We only need to create 2 more new items in order to complete phase 4, and that is the vitality potion that is created in the blender, as well as the soap that is also created in the blender. So how do we create a blender? Well, we just need some iron ingots and we need some glass. Let's focus on the vitality potion first because we need that to complete this level. Okay, so I've done the layout again. In order to make the vitality potions, we need 600 fruit wine per minute and we need 30 quicklime powder per minute. Now the quicklime is a little bit annoying because we need 4.5 crucible in order to make that and 1.5 stone crusher in order to supply the sand for that. So I'm actually inclined to double up on this entire production chain, but let's just stick with it for now. We're also going to need, in order to make that wine, we're going to need 6 extractors, and we're going to need a total of 12, if I've done my math correctly, nurseries making this red currant fruit. This is going to be producing extremely slow, but the nice thing is that we can actually use the same layout that we've used before. For the quicklime, I'm just going to rob my quicklime setup from the fertilizer setup, so I don't need to reinvent the wheel there. I just took out everything that's related to plant ash. And then for the red currant, we need 1 extractor for each 2 nurseries, and we can use the same 6x2 layout that I had before, just duplicate it twice. And then we need to actually connect this up with pipelines. This is a new type of belt, basically. And this is going to connect something like this. Now, there's no direction to these things. It's just going to put some pressure from where it's producing, and then it's just going to spit down the other end, basically. As far as I can tell, pipelines also don't have a maximum throughput. I could be wrong about that, but by the looks of it, you just connect these up, and as long as you have enough for what the stuff in the pipeline is demanding, it's just going to work just fine. Now, that means that all we need is a single blender, and if we hook up the pipeline to the blender, as well as this set of crucibles to this blender as well in the other input port, it has 2 inputs, one for the fluid and one for the belt, yeah, then we have our little setup for our potions. So that means we can have 2 blenders making those potions. Remember, I doubled everything up. And if you're wondering how to actually connect your pipes to a thing that's on a lower level, you can select where you want to start, then press T, and this is going to switch into vertical mode, basically. So if you do it like this, you can see you can easily go up, and then if you switch back to the horizontal mode, you can easily connect it up like that. Took me a moment to figure out, so hopefully that's helpful to you. So even though this is a pretty clean looking layout, we're not quite done yet because we need to have coal coming in. Now the coal for this build itself, we can actually use from the glass in the back. We can have some leftover coal powder there, so that's pretty neat. But we're also going to need fertilizer. We are going to need 2 of our fertilizer builds for this. And in order to fuel those fertilizer builds, we're going to need yet another one of those coal powder production centers. So I'm going to set all of that up and then see how things are running. And here is all of that in action. So we're producing the fuel in the back over there. Then we have the fertilizer production over here. This is the exact same build that I've been using before. Those 2 belts of fertilizer are feeding into the red currant, I think it's called, production over here. We have the quicklime being produced. And as you can see, everything is currently kind of at the standstill because you need quite a bit of that red currant for it to actually work. And well, the whole fertilizer thing is going to take a minute to actually start up. But don't despair, the thing actually works. So we can see the first vitality potions already coming in. And that means it is now time to turn to the last item we need to produce in this phase. Luckily, the soap is pretty straightforward to make, although the ratios are a little bit annoying. So in order to fill one blender with enough materials to make 20 soap minutes, we're going to need a full belt of plant ash, for which we need 3 crucibles on a furnace. And of course, we need a nursery in order to make that sage that's going to go into those crucibles. We also need 3 or 2.7 or 2/3 to be exact extractors in order to make the, what is it called, linseed oil. This looks like a giant number, but actually it's very easy to produce, because all we need to do is put up some nurseries like this, and then the flax goes into these machines, and these machines are very efficient at actually producing the linseed oil. Now, if you put all of those parts together, you can actually make a pretty interesting looking, compact, but also cute build. It's actually kind of fun with all those flowers in it. So what are we doing over here? We have the blender that is making the soap. We have the crucibles that make the plant ash right next to there on a furnace that is being fed here just below a plank. Yes, I unlocked the plank by turning in some of those pulleys, and that's just an alternative way of making an overhang. That also means that you can bring in the fertilizer that you need from the side. Some of that fertilizer is going to go up here into the nursery with the sage. Then the rest of it is going to feed into these 3 nurseries making flax. And 2 of those are on a belt below here. You can't really see it, but it's going to go into these 2 extractors. And then the last nursery is going to go up here on a second belt, because otherwise the belt gets full. And that's going to go into this last extractor over here. The 3 extractors are then combined into a single pipeline into the blender, and that's all we need. And we will have this soap spitting out with 20 per minute on this side, assuming that we feed this a little bit of fuel and a little bit of fertilizer. And of course you can build a completely dedicated facility to making soap, but for the moment I'm going to be content with feeding off a little bit of the fertilizer and fuel that I have going into my bandage setup over here. And there we go, we have some soap coming in now as well. Now, a lot of this factory is not completely optimized just yet, but again, even if stuff is backing up, that is going to solve part of the issue. I kind of ruined that for myself, honestly, by putting in these large boxes, because it takes quite a while for these to fill up. So if you want to speed up that process, just use a smaller box. So you probably don't want to use the smallest ones, but the large storage box has plenty of space. It has 8 spaces rather than the double of it for the larger ones. So that's probably a good way to go in between. And of course, remember that if you go to the next levels, you will be getting more and more of these points. Put a few in, especially fuel efficiency and fertilizer efficiency, and this build will be humming along just fine. Speaking of which, in the next level, we're going to get the knowledge altar, which is going to allow us to level up. So yeah, a lot of those levels are coming in really quick from this point forward, but for now, this is where we'll leave it at. So if you've been following along, if you found this useful, make sure you like the video. It really helps me out. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you like content like this. Either way, if you're still here, you are awesome, and I do hope to catch you in the next one.